This is the 11th and next to last installment of instructional hive inspections of the dozen IEBA hives, each begun with package bees in the middle of April. Our hope was to provide models for association first-year beekeepers whose field experience has been curtailed due to the COVID-19 epidemic. If we've raised more questions than we've answered, well, that's beekeeping. Every hive is different, and even veteran beekeepers are amazed, amused, and even stunned when they look between the boxes and the frames. As we close out 77 days, each hive is composed of 2 brood boxes. 8 hives have 1 medium, western, honey super on top. 2 have 2, 2 have none. 2 queens have been replaced. 1 hive superseded their queen, and in a little over 24 hours, one of the hives will swarm. The mass of IEBA hives over this past week is up by about 10 pounds on average, indicative of nectar being stored, some being capped as honey. Frames of bees are up slightly. Frames of brood are holding steady, all based on averages for the 12 hives. We performed an alcohol test for mites this week, the first time we have done this. In retrospect, there should have been a beekeeper term associated with each video. The beekeeper term for this video is dispatched.
So we're going to remove the lid. We got a honey super on here. We got 2 deeps. This is the same hive we've worked every single time. It is 100% foundation from the bottom to the top. So we're going to set this honey super over here behind us. Doesn't have much weight in it. A little bit.
So this hive went from 88 pounds to 104 pounds.
So there's a slight weight gain in it, or I should say slight, but a pretty good weight gain. Now, if you just look at what we see here, you can look down here and say you have 8 frames of bees without doing a lot of looking. The other thing I can tell by looking down here, the queen is keeping this laid out with brood, because you don't see but a little bit of honey on the outside frames, and that's it, sticking out. And that's pretty common of a hive like this, where you keep pushing the queen down. So Jim and I are going to go through this real quick and see what we got. And I'll get out of Jim's way. I'm the guy that tells all the lies. Now you can see without even looking at it that the queen has got this area kind of reserved for laying eggs, and she had some brood hatch out. We got honey in the corners, and we got some pretty good honey on the outside frame. Pretty typical for us to see when we're dealing with foundation build-up hive. Now that's all brood. Look at how gorgeous that is. And she's got honey in the corners, which is what we like to see this time of year that they're doing it. You see this? Look at this. I can't tell, you got it? Yep, it's wet.
It's wet.
So we're gonna cut a queen cell here. But you can see down here, they didn't draw that out. That's because it's down against the bottom board. And unfortunately, this bottom board does not have a piece of metal in it, therefore they're not likely to draw down to the bottom on some of these frames. Very nice frame here. Hold it. Got one with the head in there. Wet. Doesn't mean that you cut cells and everything.
In here where she's come back and laid.
An earlier hive that we just looked at that's right next to this, we went in there, instead of finding a nice beautiful black long queen, we found nothing.
Look at this. This is a perfect example
of
a swarm cell. Or at this point, it could be a supersedure cell.
Well, because they're not crowded, you start to question whether it's a swarm cell. This hive isn't, it's got plenty of room. So conditions for swarming are pretty ended. They don't want to swarm. But we're seeing a lot of supersedures right now. And the problem is we probably will cut this out. Then a little later we'll notice the brood drops off, maybe next week's inspection. And the good chance is we'll miss one. But like I was saying, this prior hive, we've checked it. We didn't see any queen cells last time, and what did we find in there today was a brand new tiger queen unmarked. The original queen was solid black. So we know we had a new queen hatch out. And the old queen was there last week. We saw her.
She's got all kinds of room to lay here.
So we're not looking at a swarm condition.
Is there any brood on that frame? So we got 3 frames of brood.
Yep. Now here's where hobbyists and even good experienced beekeepers start asking themselves, when do I let them just raise a new queen? We're not sure. One of the biggest things is I usually don't like to raise a new queen out of a hive when I can put a queen that'll be laying right away in there and not wait for that to happen. But
that was a full frame, Scott.
Yeah, 4 frames. There she is.
so nice and black, and she's kind of fat too, so she's doing a good job of laying.
A lot of larvae.
5 frames.
Yeah.
Remember what I said when we opened it up, the activity down here in this bottom box would lead us to believe that this was mostly brood down here. Little bit of honey they're switching here, putting that outside frame to honey. What's the inside look like?
Brood.
Brood. So they're doing a really good job. They got honey on the outsides of both of the outside frames. So that is pretty typical of what you want. We have our queen downstairs. We have mostly brood frames. We have no reason to bring a frame from upstairs downstairs
So we're
to
going to
this
call it
hive.
5.5 frames of brood.
Yeah.
So we got 2 frames that weren't drawn out last Friday. Well, we could say it's pretty much drawn out pretty close right now. But look at them pouring the honey into this area. Just about, there you go, that's just perfect. Look at all that honey. Won't be long before they cap that.
Jeez.
Whoa. So one of the things that we wanted to talk about for a minute today is you're starting to see quite a bit of deep frames, pretty well capped in the second box. If this frame was completely capped, we would probably want to take it out and use that frame for our honey bank. So remember, in the class we teach you to save 2 deep frames back out of your hive during the summer and put them in for a honey bank.
You may not end up using them as food for the bees early in the spring, but if you go ahead and start a nuke or something like that, you're going to need that honey to start that nuke in the spring.
Look at that.
Oh, little devils.
I would say right now we have a queen that they're thinking about superseding her. Now this other hive they superseded. We saw the old queen last week. She was laying. There are no eggs and larvae in that hive today. So the old queen has passed since last week. And we're pretty safe here by cutting these because she has eggs and larvae in here. If there were no eggs and larvae and we saw the queen, you'd be worried about doing that.
How much are you going to call that?
That's about a third.
Third?
Yeah.
Okay. 5.5 frames. Ooh.
They're getting real serious. Look at this, how big these queen cells are since last week. and we cut every cup in every cell last week. So that makes you a little nervous, you know. I think this hive is serious about superseding, probably.
Oh, look at how pretty that is. But she's laying so well.
Yeah, you don't.
You don't want to mess with this,
Well,
really.
6.5 frames.
That looked like 8/9 to me, Scott.
Look at this beautiful honey here for a second box. Now remember, we had lots of brood downstairs, about 5.5 frames, and we've got quite a few frames up here. She's laying at about capacity, and what you're seeing is in the second box, very traditional this time of year, they start to fill the second box with honey. That's what they need for winter stores next year.
Yeah, you're right, it's 9, because it was 6.5, half, 7, 8, 9.
And look at that, drawing it out pretty nice. So the 2 combs that were not drawn out are now drawn out, and we will mark them before we close this up. Whoa. Nice frame of honey.
It's marked.
And pollen.
Yeah. Look at this side. Wow. So they're not really ready to have you pull a frame out for a honey bank looking at this, because I prefer to pull out frames that are capped. They will cap those 2 outside frames to the bottom without a problem before long. Here you go. We still have a pretty good honey flow going. Now let's take a quick look at our super. Now if you look in here, we got bees working here. We got a few bees here. The rest of this is pretty open. The reason you'll see bees here is, where was the heaviest honey frame? Right over here on the outside, they're coming straight up. It's very traditional. Look where your honey is in the bottom box. You put a foundation super on, that's probably where the honey's gonna be there too.
They're drawing this out real nice. Just starting.
So just starting on it, that's where all the bees are. We don't hardly have any bees in here at all. We have no drawn frames, so we're not. Hive here that last week had a good looking queen in it, and we cut all the cells so there were none left. But we come in this week, a week later, there's a whole bunch of cells that are capped. We've got about 11 of them that are capped. But I didn't cut the cells because I wasn't sure what was happening, because when I found the first cell, it was frame number 2, and there wasn't an egg in sight, and it was hatching out. So I thought, well, before we cut them, we'll look at the rest of them. We've gone through 8 frames, and there's not an egg in this hive, and no sign of the queen. We'll take a look at the second box. I'm guessing the second box is going to be mostly, this is all going to be honey. You got to wonder why when they have tons of room. And so they are superseding this queen, and she is already passed. So right now, I don't have a queen in the queen bank to put in here and cut all those cells. So we're gonna let this rock and roll till next Friday, when we take a look at it again and see if those cells have hatched. But they're filling this number 2 box up with honey where the brood hatches out, they're filling it. So we've actually gone downhill. We have less amount of bees in here than we had last week, and less brood. Other thing we want to show you today is a separate video on doing a mite check on a hive. Now we got a fairly strong hive here, and we found the queen. She's right here on this frame over here, and so I have a frame here that is, this is all eggs and larvae, and this here is all eggs and larvae. You can see the large amount of nurse bees on this frame.
Jim, talk about your kit there as you disassembled it all.
We're going to take the mite check, and we're going to fill it up to here with alcohol to the bottom of the basket. Now you can use alcohol, or you can use Dawn Ultra, which is equal to 90% alcohol. You mix 1 to 2 tablespoons in a gallon of water, and it works just as well. No reason to use more, it doesn't do any good, but if you use less than that, it's not nearly as efficient.
Note the efficiency of Jim's plastic tub of mite checking equipment.
So we got the plastic tub to shake the bees into. We've got a container to measure out a half a cup of bees to drop into our mite checker. And right there, So
first of all, what I'm going to do is, like Jerry said, you want to make sure that you have open brood, because that's where all the nurse bees are. And you want to make sure that the queen is not on this frame. Then you're going to give it one quick snap. Set this back where it came from. The bees that are flying out are not the nurse bees. So they're mainly field bees, or they have some other job. So you're going to take it and take a scoop of bees, put them in here. Put the top on it. Go back, set these back into the hive. Go back here. Take your time because they're in there now. And then you're going to dispatch these bees. And that's all it takes right there. Once they're dispatched, you can see that it comes up to the middle of those two lines inside the basket, which means there's between 200 and 300 bees in here. Then you're going to take your alcohol and you're going to fill this 3/4 of the way full. And then you're going to swirl it. If you're using Dawn, don't shake it. So just a light swirl is going to work real well. Most of the mites are already off the bees and down in the bottom right now. What I will do is I will do this for a minute or so and then set it down, go do something else, come back and do it a little bit more. For all purposes, they're done now. And I always take the basket and just plunge it a little bit like this, in case there's any loose mites in there. Then lift up. Now we chose this hive because it's the largest hive. It's going to have the highest concentration of bee or mites in it. Now, another trick you can use is a mirror. You can look down inside to see if you see any mites, or you can set the mirror on here, and then 10 power works the best, and there's one mite in there. There's no sense in wasting your alcohol, so you can take a paint strainer and pour the alcohol back into another container. What I do is I always make sure I strain it first, and then I'll put alcohol into the bottom. It's not working. So the next time, all I have to do is come and grab this and it's all ready to go. I don't have to go ahead and do that part.